Hey guys, today we will be talking of a few things I learned in my early stages of making games. So you can view this as tips if you are concerned, or simply things which you may come to realize later on. Think about this as me sharing my experience. So I'm gonna share obviously tips on how my perspective on things changed and how I decided to do things differently. But know that it might not directly apply to you because every human's different and you might process information and things differently. All right, so now that this is out of the way, let's go with the first point. The point number one is that making games is a very time consuming craft or hobby or job or whatever. Um, Mostly because it is, if you're making video games, right? Programs are very complex to create, and games are very complex programs. So, yeah, you really have to be ready to give time into making your game and into learning, etc., etc. So, the reason why I'm talking about this is because, well, first, you have to think about how is your life going? Do you have a job which takes way too much time? Do you have to take care of so much things just to keep your life together? How many hours do you have left to actually make a game in a week, in a day? That's something you really have to consider. If you have a very short amount of time, it's alright. Doesn't mean like you shouldn't make games, but in that scenario, you should be way more strategic and well, you really have to think about whether or not you're going to be able to handle this because making game is work. Of course, it can be work that you like doing, but it is still work. So if you work the majority of your day and then you have to take care of the family and then you go back to work to make your game, think about the amount of energy you can give out in one day. The second reason why I want to talk about the time is because here I'm now part of the people who make content on game dev on YouTube, and I also have to consume a certain amount of content myself. And what I realize is that there's this, I don't want to say trend, but I want to say that I guess people tend to gravitate more around videos which are short videos. And I'm gonna tell you there are two types of short videos, and there's a right way to go toward short videos and a wrong way to go toward short videos. The wrong way to go toward short videos is basically clicking those things which say how to make a main menu in 5 minutes, or how I used Godot to make GTA 5 in 2 weeks or a month, or that kind of videos which are basically using this very appealing, do this very complex thing in such a short amount of time. It's so unrealistic, but at the same time, you want to know how they managed to do this, and most of the time, the answer is they didn't. Or what they did is like a super crunched version of whatever took them hours to make. And they advertise it as in this main menu was made in 5 minutes. Well, yeah, you can copy paste this main menu in 5 minutes, and even copy pasting or manually typing is going to take you more than 5 minutes, because 5 minutes is just the video being entirely crushed and condensed, right? So, what I understood at some point is that all those videos which try to make game dev feel like it's easy and there's a way to shortcut it. There's not. There's no way to shortcut it. Especially if you want to be a programmer. Those videos, which mostly consist of people showing you stuff that you are supposed to copy paste, is wrong. Okay? It's wrong because it doesn't teach you, it just gives you a result, right? It's like, here is how you can sculpt wood in 5 minutes, and then they give you the sculpture, and like, okay, you can use this sculpture, I did it for you. But you didn't sculpt it yourself, and sculpting it yourself is gonna take way much more understanding, time, and many try and errors. So yeah, the right way to be looking for short videos is basically that, as I said, making games takes time. So when you are working in a time consuming industry, well, time is precious. And many video makers know that. So you have people we say in a tutorial, people are not interested in watching you blah blah about your life, type for hours, hesitate, make mistake. They just want the final product. And it is true. Sometimes people are just looking for very quick solutions to one problem. And that solution doesn't come in the form of a 2 hour long tutorial. It comes in the form of, here is a code that gives you autopathing in Godot. So the right way to use those videos, because they still have value, is to actually be a very good programmer at first, because you need to be able to discern whether or not the code is good or it's trash, right? You need to know if you're just dealing with someone who's giving you something with value and who cares about your time, crunching it into something that's fast and condensed, or is it something that's just bad and someone's trying to sell something which is way better than it is in a short amount of time. So it takes knowledge and expertise to be able to make the difference between those two kind of videos. It's also very important to be good enough at programming so that you can deconstruct what you have, right? Because you don't have much manual, you don't have much explanations. So you need to be able to deconstruct it yourself and understand it yourself so that you can reuse it yourself. All right. So that was the first point about time. My second point is, making games requires a lot of different skills: artistic skills, sound design skills, game design, UI design, programming, advertising eventually, if that's if you want to sell your game, network database, file management, right? There's so much you need to do if you want to work with games. And you just can't fix everything right off the bat from the start. Some people, like the first example I have in head right now is Concerned Ape, Eric Barron, for those who know this guy who made Stardew Valley alone. There are people like this guy who are, I want to say, jack of all trades. They enjoy dealing with all the different kinds of things there's to do in a game. They don't necessarily run after the pixel perfect game. They know how to cut corners, they know how to make their prototype working. There's just a lot of skills and a specific mindset, really, that is necessary to be able to make that kind of game alone and publish it. It might not be your case, because from my experience and what I've seen, people tend to be more specialized than what Consent Ape is doing. So there are things which are very appealing to you. For example, in my case, it's programming and optimizing resources and things like this. Trying to find the best way to answer a problem, the best solution, basically, based on the needs. So because of that, that's what I like doing. That's what I like practicing, and I will be good at it on the long run. But on the other end, I'm not so good at making arts, for example. So my point here is that it is very, I mean, it helped me a lot to just give up this idea of all those things are necessary for a good game to work. It is true, a good game needs good art, good music, good design, etc., etc. But it doesn't mean you have to do it all alone. Games are usually made by several people working together on a project with the same in the same direction. So my suggestion here, which is what helped me move forward, is go with your, I want to say, intuition and whatever appeals to you at some point, right? For example, for a very long time, it wasn't appealing at all to deal with 2D nodes or art or things like this. And for a very long time, I just worked with user interface, with very rudimentary icons and the base user interface things of the engines I would work with. And that was very helpful because I was actually able to make things which work, which were playable, without me having to bang my head against a wall because I'm just not getting what I want with the sprites or with the 2D looks, whatever. And now that I'm very much more comfortable making those UIs and stuff, I start or begin to gravitate more toward making 2D stuff, using the cameras, more of those things, because now that's what I'm being called by my brain to learn. So it will come, right? Um, if you want your game to be more graphic, I mean, not in that sense, but more artistic, um, it will be easier if you have a more stable foundation of whatever you're doing best. Of course, if programming is not your main skill, making a game can be very hard if you're only an artist or anything. I don't know anything about visual scripting, so I can't tell you how easy or hard it is to make a game when programming isn't your main skill. But ultimately, you may find some people who will help you do that, right? For example, think about just me. Um, I don't necessarily have a project consuming most of my time. So if someone comes to me and say, "Okay, I'm an artist. I want to make a game like this. Can you provide me this code?" Then yeah, why not? I may have the time. So yeah, you might think about exposing yourself a little bit more, get out there and tell people what you're doing, what you're good at, what you're looking for. Maybe you'll end up making projects in game jams or just by going on some discords and saying, okay, I have this project. Does anyone want to help? And I'm gonna tell you, you're gonna be confronted to a lot of nothingness or lots of no because people have their own time. But sometimes you will find people who just want to practice their thing and they're like, okay, I want to practice programming, but I don't have any inspiration, anything I want to do in particular. And working on someone else's problem could be a solution. So, yeah, we aren't islands. We need to be connecting with others and, yeah, get out there to connect with others. My third point is work with your subconscious and use it wisely. Because what I realized at some point is that the conscious mind, which is basically whatever you're doing and you're conscious that you're doing, like trying to learn a new feature, a new way of doing things, whatever, the conscious mind has its limits. And oftentimes you want to learn something that you are just getting into, like I don't know, for example, how to make a tile map and how to make a RPG map with movements, etc., etc. And let's say that for a reason you have something that blocks you, right? You just can't. You try, you get, you understand things, but you feel that there's this overload feeling in your brain. So my point here is that it is very important. I mean, it helped me a lot to be very mindful of those feeling that my brain was sending me, right? Um, Sometimes I really want to learn things, but my brain is like, no, no, I can't. No, I don't know I want. And why some people may argue that it's you should push through the resistance, I'm actually going a different way. I'm actually trying to understand the resistance, why the resistance is here, and most of the time, why I did have, you know, resistance because I was, afraid of some irrational things. Most of the time, the actual reason there was a resistance is because my brain, my subconscious, didn't have the time to process all the informations that I received at some point. By giving it time and getting back later to the problem, it gets way easier, right? Like, for example, when I first started with Unity, how to make games, I just couldn't understand anything I was doing. Like, the whole engine was like cryptic to me. Like, I just couldn't understand anything. And I was pushing through it until I somehow burnt out of it. And I was like, okay, it's so annoying, so frustrating. And I feel like I can't achieve anything and I'm tired. So I had to get away from it. And the first break I took was like a year, I think, before I get back to it. And a year later, without doing anything game dev related, I opened Unity and I was like, it's actually so easy. It's very easy. But all I did was absolutely nothing but wait. So the first time it happened to me, it took a year, right? But now, when I have a problem like that, I'm much more sensible to my brain saying, here we are overheating. So get away from that, do something different, clear your head, and come back later. And now it can, in a few days, I can come back to a problem that I had a few days before, and it's much easier, much, much easier. So the core of this point here is I basically want you to understand that Your brain need to process things in your subconscious mind, and you need to give it time. So be mindful and be open to any messages that your body is sending to you, that your brain, most likely, is sending to you. Because most of the time the brain's right. Sometimes they are just like irrational fears. But even though there are some irrational fears you have to deal with, well, it's in the sentence, you will have to deal with it. The next point, and probably the last one for this video, is gonna be sometimes it's okay to do bad things, terrible things, very awful, bad looking, not optimized things, but things which work. Not every project you have must be the best project of your life, and it's not necessarily needing to be the most complex and most beautiful program you've ever made. It's okay sometimes to work on a big project that is a big work of art and then come back to simpler things, which are just going to be exercises, tryings, and do things just for the sake of, I'm going to try something different and I'm not going all the way to make it beautiful and perfect, and I will just want to try to make it work differently, and that's it. And again, that will go with the sense of overheating and stuff, but yeah, sometimes when you're prototyping, it's very okay to um, do things very simply, right? For example, I was watching a video of a guy making a card games, and he wanted to do this, little round arc to show the hand of cards, right? So that the hands of the cards in your hand show on a radius at the bottom of your screen, and there's this slight arc. So he went directly into making the mathematical calculations to basically stack any amount of cards you want in the hand and find the right position, the right angle, so that the cards are in the perfect thing. Ultimately, you will have to do that if you want your game to be a big game and functioning. But is it necessary that you complete this feature right now? Or can you just say, okay, I want to just try things and prototype the game, so instead of making these whole features which could take hours, I will just have designated positions for the cards so that they have fixed positions, and I'm going to limit the amount of cards to 5 at the moment. This way you just hard code the position, the angles, etc., etc. Or you just set the cards vertical, right? You're like, okay, the arc thing is very cool, but at the moment I will have vertical cards because it's way easier to try. Oftentimes when you're making games, before actually making the game, you have to give or make what we call a proof of concept, which is a prototype that showcases the mechanics of your game and shows that, okay, this is the game we want to make. We are making it the very, very, very minimal way it can be done, and we try it. Is it fun? And when you're trying things like this, just trying to implement game mechanics, you don't want those things to be polished at first. Those are things that you need to do later on, right? Because, for example, if you think about my interactive map thing, um, you can have the tooltips. You can have. I had this idea basically of a game where you could assign workers to areas, but you can do this with the map right off the bat. But first, you want to know if your gameplay is fun, right? So you don't necessarily need to create an interactive map for that. You can use buttons, right? To say, I'm assigning a worker here. And then later on, you say, okay, but wouldn't it be way better if instead of clicking on a plus button next to a mining word, if we had a map so that we could assign the workers visually? Yeah, definitely, definitely. But this comes in time. I'm gonna add a next point after that, and that point is um, architect versus gardener. So if you worked a little bit as a writer, or if you've been interested in writing, you've probably already heard about architect versus gardener. So basically, in the writing industry, architects are those who create the outlines, the characters, the places, and they create the storyline, and they create the entire skeleton of the story, and then they write it. Like they're like, okay, I need this scene which takes place in this place with those characters, and this has to happen. This is what architects do. And gardeners, they're like, okay, I'm just gonna write a chapter, see how it goes, and then I will, tend to the bushes, um, take out what needs to be taken out, flesh out what needs to be fleshed out. These basically represent two approaches to writing a novel, which are based on whether you need to plan before or whether you actually want to go with the flow. Making games is kind of the same. You can plan ahead and make the whole documentation of how your game is going to be created, and then you create all your abstract classes, all your things, and make the game. Or you can be a gardener, what we usually call a prototyper, and just prototype and go more and more complex and try to scale up from the prototyping. So my point here is that be a gardener, but don't be a messy gardener, and be an architect, but don't be an armchair architect, right? So the armchair architect is the guy who just sits in that chair and they make the plans and don't do anything. They just make the plans. So that's problematic. Or they plan so far in the future that they will basically plan things which will never be made or realized. So you will have to be an architect and a prototyper. When you're prototyping, you will have lots of ideas and thoughts which will come to you. Don't let those ideas and thoughts slip away. It is very crucial that you keep track of all those things. So back in the days, I used to use Gitkraken's Glow boards, which is basically a Kanban Trello board, because it was integrated in Gitkraken, but now it's not. So I'm trying to find a new Kanban tool for that. But yeah, whenever I would had a thought, an idea, or a bug, or whatever thing that I thought could be interesting for me to know later or to do later, I would create a card and create all the cards and stack them, right? You are like, oh, maybe, like, just for example, you have your hand of cards and they are like lined up linearly, and you're thinking, oh, it could be interesting to have the cards showing in an arc of circle. So you create a card, make the cards in an arc of circle. That's pretty much how it works, right? Because if you don't, you will just get caught up in prototyping, and the good ideas with will come, they will slip away, and you will never have to enjoy those ideas anymore. So yeah, be a prototyper, but an organized prototyper, not a messy one. Be an architect, and don't be a dreaming architect. Me do things. All right, this is all I have to say in this video at the moment. I hope you liked it. I hope you found some things interesting. And I will see you in another video in a later time. You take care, and I'm out.